Hello, Sam Green here, providing practical and sensible advice to small and medium-sized businesses. So this video's for you if you're not really sure quite who you need to get or what you need to do in terms of health and safety. So what we're going to cover in the next 3 or 4 minutes is appointment and competence. So particularly, who do you need to appoint to look after health and safety? How does that work in terms of health and safety law? What does it all mean? We're going to do a short definition of really what subjects would be covered by that appointment. So let's kick off with some things perhaps that we're not going to cover. So there's some very specialist appointments that you might need to make, for example, around first aid regulations. So that's obviously first aid trained people. Construction regulations require some very specific appointments with specific competencies and qualifications for a person to manage a construction project. Fire actually requires a responsible person, which would be the manager, a nominated person, which would be the fire wardens, and a competent person to carry out the fire risk assessment. And then there's some really specialist appointments required for things like Legionella, where you need a competent person with a specific definition there, and things like radiation, where you have to have a radiation officer. So what we're going to cover in this video is appointment, generally, if you like, to advise and assist on health and safety. So every employer has to appoint a competent person to advise and assist on health and safety. Now that's set out in what's called the management regulations, and in the article that goes with this video, I'll post a link if you want to have a read of that yourself. It's not a particularly long regulation. So that requirement applies to anyone that employs one or more people. Now, the only exception to that is if a person is a sole trader or if they're self-employed. So what does that really mean? Well, I'm going to cover what sort of subjects that competent person might advise and assist with, and we're going to give you a little bit of a definition of what advice means and what assistance means, and a few examples. And as usual, if you've got any questions or comments, please post them in, and I'll make sure that I put some answers up there for you just to try and help. So what does it mean in practice? Well, I've got a list actually. There are between 20 and 30 subjects or regulations really that a competent person in terms of general health and safety would advise and assist with. So I'm just going to read that list out. So it's things like fire, first aid, lifting equipment like forklifts or platform lifts, noise, protective equipment, accidents, so accident reporting and logging, and then a thing called RIDDOR, which is reporting more serious accidents to the health and safety executive, safety signs, things like vibration at work, so using handheld power tools, work at height, machinery, workstations, particularly if that means sitting at a computer for an hour or more. There's some requirements around communication and consultation that you need to meet. There's a difference technically between communication and consultation. Chemicals and dangerous substances, and that includes dusts. Electrical equipment and electrical installations to your building. Information that you have to give your employees about health and safety. Risk assessments, obviously a fairly big one for health and safety. Emergency procedures, manual handling, what you might call human health or occupational health. So that's separate to occupational assessments, which an occupational nurse would carry out. So just looking at human health. And then specifically some construction elements to that as well. So if you're having an extension to your existing factory. So very specialist stuff like Legionella and explosive atmospheres is really separate to what we're going to cover today. So really that's a very, very brief summary and not an exhaustive list. But most of those subjects are the sort of things that a safety person employed directly or a safety consultant that you bring in from the outside. And typically if you've got less than 150 employees and less than a sort of £4 or £5 million turnover, having an externally appointed person is going to be way better value for you than employing somebody full-time on a salary, of course. So it's important perhaps to define exactly, to some extent, what competence really means. So you've got to appoint a competent person to advise and assist. So 3 things you want to define: what's competence, what's advice, and what's assistance. So really a competence isn't defined absolutely, but it's skills, knowledge and experience enough. So in other words, you need to know enough about health and safety, and you need to know enough about what happens in that particular organisation. So the best summary I've found for that is all of the activities, products and services. Or the 4 Ps is quite helpful: people, places, processes and plant. And they're the sort of things that we need to make sure we're doing correctly. So sort of things that you would look out for is somebody that was NEBOSH qualified or had a degree level qualification, some kind of city and guilds to level 3 as a minimum, or an NVQ, either 3 or potentially a level 5 NVQ really if they're going to advise a medium-sized business. You want to look for some kind of professional membership. The biggest of those is IOSH, Institution of Occupational Safety and Health. That's the organisation that we're members of, but there's also ROSPA, most people have heard of those. The IIRSM, International Institute of Risk and Safety Management. There's British Safety Council, and there's the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, and that's the working environment, not the natural environment, so we're not talking about pollution. So IOSH is the biggest and the best known of the safety organisations. It's the one that government are working with. It's the National Register for Safety Consultants, managed through them, and all the continuous professional development that me and my team have is all managed through them. So that's competence: skills, knowledge and experience. So what does advice mean? Well, advice really is just telling you what you need to do, telling you what you need to know, and perhaps almost more importantly, telling you what you don't need to do. You wouldn't believe the number of times that I'm advising clients on things that they think are a legal requirement. We'll perhaps do a separate video on that with a whole list of things that you actually don't need to do. Things like footing ladders and pat testing and all sorts of stuff that people think, and wearing protective equipment, things that people think that you have to do for health and safety, and you really generally don't need to do those. That's not to say you shouldn't. Okay, so advice is really telling you what you need to know, what you need to do, and perhaps more importantly what you don't need to do. So assistance is quite different. Now assistance is practical help. So that's actually carrying out work. So that's making assessments, in particular all different types of risk assessments and premises inspections. But it might also be writing safe systems or safe working procedures and safe policies. So assistance is, if you like, getting your hands dirty, at least as dirty as they ever get as a health and safety consultant. So there are 3 other requirements in terms of appointment of a competent person to advise and assist on that list of 20 items that we listed earlier. And that is, you must cooperate, or you must ensure cooperation between all of the competent people, because of course you might have more than one competent person. You must make sure there's adequate resources. So that's one of the things that we'd always do with a client initially, is have a look at all of their activities, products and services, and make sure that we've got enough hours down to make sure we cover everything for them. And you must provide information on anything and everything that's relevant to health and safety. And that also includes information that, for example, might be personal and sensitive. It is more important that we keep people healthy and safe legally than that we might, share some personal and sensitive information. So safety trumps GDPR, which is a bit of an interesting topic, of course, that a lot of people have been talking about recently. So hopefully that was helpful and informative. Please post any questions. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more of these types of videos. And if you want to see more articles, have a look on the news section of our website. That's greensconsultancy.co.uk. And if you do need any help or any further advice or any documentation, please feel free to give us a call on Leicester 216 9224. And one of my colleagues will be sure to get in touch and have a chat. Thank you.